thank you for joining us today. Real pleasure to see you.
I'm delighted.
Thank you. Tell me about the guiding principles of the charities. When you first decided to do this, what was it you were trying to achieve?
In Canada?
Yeah.
Well, really, because I mean, having been coming to to Canada for the last 40 years or something, I just felt that after all the things I've been doing in this country, with setting up organizations and charities to try and deal with issues that I felt needed dealing with, or weren't being dealt with, that perhaps now is the time to try and do similar things in Canada. Mm-hmm. And like all these things, it takes years before you've built up the experience or the capacity to do something like that. And if you're going to do something, you have to find kind supporters and generous people and others who may be interested in what I'm trying to do. So that was really the main reason, and I thought I might be able to contribute a little bit here and there to Canadian life.
Did you have a principle that you wanted to build everything on?
Well, I suppose based on some of the things I say I've been doing here, whether it's in the built environment or community planning or with young youth business enterprise and building young people's self-confidence and self-esteem and giving them opportunities and helping to develop their potential, or in a whole variety of areas and sustainability issues and generally. So I just felt that there might be some relevance in Canada to some of these issues. So obviously they're around certain principles, yeah.
You could have, as you know, you could have kind of done what you wanted in your life. Was there a pivotal moment where you thought that this kind of service was the one you wanted to do?
I couldn't do anything else in my life.
Well, you could have figured something out, I'm sure. You know some people.
Well, I know, but I think, but I was always brought up, to worry about everybody else. And as you can imagine, the Commonwealth and in Canada, Australia, New Zealand, there's a lot of people, and I take all these things seriously.
Mm-hmm. The things that you do, it's interesting. Architecture, who would have thought it could be controversial, but it was. When you talk about built cities, organic food, people used to make jokes at the conversation about it, but all this, like, what were you feeling at the time when you were trying to affect change and were feeling that kind of attack?
Well, I mean, you could imagine it's slightly alarming and bewildering because I thought that I was just trying to point out that there were problems that were likely to arise if we went on that way. And but I think what happens is frequently you challenge conventional wisdom and the conventional approach, and so people don't like that very much. And all I wanted to show was that I felt we had to look at these issues in order to prevent being overwhelmed by them at some stage. And I just felt also we were getting a bit out of balance in some of these things. So the baby was being thrown out with the bathwater. And I just felt it needed some things being brought back because of the way in which our existence on this earth is so often dependent on sometimes more timeless things. We still are human beings. We still have to face so many of the issues that everybody else has had to face. Mm-hmm. And I just felt that there were other ways perhaps of looking at some of these things. And well, it was on, as far as the organic side is concerned, it's 30 years ago now, I suppose I felt that what was happening in the conventional agri-industrial field was unsustainable over a long term because it didn't actually pay attention to nature, didn't pay attention to the health of the soil, and I thought was over-dependent on chemicals and indeed on very often the prophylactic use of antibiotics in everything, animal feed and you name it. And now, indeed, we've got a huge problem, which is antimicrobial resistance.
You have a book called Harmony, and it's this idea that the iron rule of ecology is that everything is connected. But when you try to reach people and affect change, they seem to be resistant to the things that make the most sense. So how have you managed to navigate that? And governments included, because governments are a really big player in this, right?
Well, I don't know. I've always felt the secret is not to be party political. But I mean, for instance, when I raised issues around planning and architecture and actually consulting local people and so on, nobody had bothered to talk about these things very much. And the regeneration and reuse of historic buildings and huge complexes. All that I felt was a waste of assets, but it's extraordinary how you come up against the conventional approach. So when I suggested that you could actually create mixed use, mixed income communities and not just housing estates as ghettos really of either rich or poor people. And you could mix affordable housing with private housing. I was told that in the real world this couldn't be done. So anyway, I went away and did it. And now it's suddenly become a bit more the thing.
Did somebody give you great advice you were given about public service when you were growing up?
Oh yes, I have endless people. I mean, I've always rather had an exaggerated respect for and interest in older people, trying to pick up some of their wisdom and experience. So yes, endless people who I used to ask about things and sat and listened to. You pick up a lot that way.
Is there something that resonates with you that you kind of keep close to your heart? I was reading in your harmony books, there's that Gandhi quote that you had quoted, this idea that at first people will laugh at you and then they'll ignore you and then they will fight you and then you win.
Well, yes, possibly. But usually after you're dead, I think.
Yeah. Do you think much? I mean, when you've built, like for decades now, this legacy of the charities and the trust, all these different areas that you're working in, do you counsel your kids and there's grandkids now about what service could be and what can be done in this role?
Yes, I mean, with children, it's always, you've got to be careful not to overdo that. But I don't know, I just felt that if they witnessed, or sometimes people absorb things by osmosis, and I mean, they're terrific, both my children. They rush about doing every kind of thing. So I think they've got also this feeling, and I mean, it's called duty, which has become an old-fashioned word for some reason. But that was what I was always brought up to understand. And there is an enormous amount that needs doing. There are masses of people who need help and encouragement. And I'm just one of those people who minds. And so when I find things that aren't happening somewhere, I want to do something about it. I'm the bane of my office and everybody who works.
You are?
Well, they always come up with another idea.
What's it like when someone receives a phone call from you when you want to bring a new
I don't know, but oh yes, where's he going now?
That's right. I want to talk about quality of life is something we talk about and all the different areas. How do you actually get it to resonate with people?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I hope some of it does. It's always difficult to tell. I mean, interestingly, I think on the built environment community planning side, because when you involve people and sit down with them and facilitate an opportunity to come together and look at a potential new development, it's amazing how it helps almost as a cathartic process to release tensions and people, if you do it over 2 or 3 days, and people have an opportunity to say what they're looking for, before you know where you are, you're actually creating, a rather timeless, more, we called it, traditional arrangement, with a recognizable centre and heart. And I've always felt that the secret is how to reintegrate the human being and nature into the whole design process. Because for the last, I don't know, whatever it is, 80, 90 years or 100 years, we've designed everything with the car at the centre and not the pedestrian. And if you change that round and put the pedestrian at the centre and nature, you create a completely different, more humane, people-centred, walkable environment, which could be much more attractive.
Could you ever imagine London being that way, though? Or even in Canada, Toronto?
You see. That was how it was designed. Yeah. And I mean, all the greatest cities were all designed on that basis. And that's why, I mean, ironically, here in London, the two areas that hold their value and rise in value even more than anywhere else are Mayfair and St James's.
Where you can walk? Because
it's the quality of the environment. You could walk, and it has, smaller streets. I mean, the interesting thing, what I've done is to show that you can do this in today's world and still have all the benefits of modern life and technology. It doesn't have to mean you go back to the Middle Ages. But by narrowing the streets and curving and everything else, which we've shown how you can do it, you control the car and people can reclaim the streets, including children. So you don't need, false sleeping policemen and, calming points and narrowings and all this stuff that they have to retrofit. So if you think about it and reintroduce, the mixed communities, you don't have everything zoned. Mm-hmm. So people live over there, then they have to drive miles to work there, then you put the factories somewhere else.
It's a big rethink for people, isn't it, to get them to go there?
But when they see it on the ground, people actually frequently can't believe it's possible. So the secret is to provide people with an alternative.
Let's see the little leaf and the tie. What's your relationship like with Canada over the years? You've got that down.
You're the one who can tell me.
Yeah, no, you don't. I don't. You do.
But I love coming to Canada. I enjoy always seeing Canadians everywhere. But I mean, as you can imagine, I feel a great interest in everything that's going on in Canada. So when we come this time, I find, of course, it gets busier and busier because I now have more and more organisations that I'm involved with and try and take an interest in. Fitting it all in is always quite difficult.
The more you travel around the world, do you see the commonalities between people and how we are the same?
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I'm a great believer, for what it's worth, in unity through diversity. Mm-hmm. And the key is to encourage diversity. But you can create it. You create the unity through recognising people's individual cultures and outlook. And that's the point, I think. But what I try to do is enable people to feel pride in their own cultural identity.
When did you have a moment where you felt like you had really found your voice? When you started to engage in this world and you thought, yeah, this is what I should be doing?
Long time ago. I mean, I used to think about these things an awful lot, I suppose. I observed and then read and felt about these things, talked to people. And what I've been terribly anxious to do is to capture the wisdom and experience that we've inherited over thousands of years before people who had all that in different ways and skills disappeared. Because in the 1960s, so many of these things were being thrown away, literally, as being no longer relevant in any way. Mm-hmm. So it was almost as if an axe had come down between the past. And that seemed to be crazy because our lives consist of a balance and a blend between the past and the present. You can't tell what's going to happen in the future. Mm-hmm. We have to live in the present. So I wanted to capture some of this wisdom and knowledge before it is all gone. That's what I'm trying to do, and encourage the acquisition of skills. It was riveting how things come round, because I mean, this country 30, 40 years ago, we abandoned apprenticeships, for instance. Other countries didn't. Germany didn't. And for years I've been trying to say, look, we need to encourage the skills amongst young people in this, that and the other area, which is indeed what I've tried to do with my Prince's Trust.
I've seen you meet kids who have benefited from the programs, and we've interviewed people on our show who've talked about it in the past. How does that make you feel when you see the growth?
Very proud. Yeah. I mean, I met several last night. We had a reception for my Prince's Trust, and this was the enterprise program, which is starting people in their own businesses. So I've been doing that since, in the last 34, 35 years. And we've set up nearly 90,000 businesses. But the fun for me is now to meet people we started 30 or 25 years ago who've made literally millions. And very often either they sell their company sometimes, and then they come back and help give generously to my trust to keep it going.
A real pleasure. Thank you, sir.
Merci.
Thank you for your time.